All stand, please. All persons having anything to do with this sitting of the Supreme Court of Tasmania draw nigh and give your attendance. Please be seated.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Armstrong.
Good morning, Your Honour. The matter is continuing. Before I recall Dr. Marsden Smedley, can I just report to Your Honour one matter that Council has been discussing this morning, which is Your Honour may have noticed that there was a section of the transcript at the very start of Dr. Marsden Smedley's substantive evidence. It currently appears at page 384 of the transcript. It doesn't need to be brought up, but Council are all agreed, and we've now confirmed that there was a couple of minutes of where the transcript just seems to have dropped out altogether. Mr. Ioannidis has just sent an email to Your Honour's associate to address this issue. He's checked the YouTube recording, and the relevant passage was recorded on YouTube, so we'll be able to restore it and have it put into the transcript. But it was an important topic that I was dealing with Dr. Marsden Smedley. It should be in the transcript, and with Your Honour's leave, we'll arrange for the transcript to be updated to restore the missing section.
Yes, well, I think before Council take any active steps, let me communicate with the transcribing section. We have two recording systems,
Yes.
and I know one of them went down last week, and so did the other, but they were, as far as I know, neither were down at the same time.
Yep.
So we might be able to recover it in the ordinary way. Otherwise, as you say, it can be transcribed from YouTube.
Certainly.
We'll deal with that during the course of the morning.
Thank you, Your Honour. So just for Your Honour's assistance in the transcript, people's assistance, the missing section is at the start of Dr. Marsden Smedley's second session of evidence. It currently appears at page 384 of the transcript, and it's in the paragraph that starts at line 25, and there's then, we think, we have confirmed a couple of minutes missing. Now, having dealt with that administrative matter, Your Honour, if it's convenient to the court, we would seek to recall Dr. Marsden Smedley.
Nothing from you, Mr. Reid?
Only, Your Honour, that before I conclude my cross-examination of Dr. Marsden Smedley, I would appreciate the opportunity to reconsider that piece of transcript.
Yes. Have you listened to it on YouTube? Or?
No, I haven't.
Yes. No. All right. Well, one way or the other, we'll arrange for that to happen. Thank you. Yes, thanks, Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Honour. I recall Dr. John Marsden Smedley.
Thank you.
Will you take an oath or choose to make an affirmation?
Affirmation.
Do you solemnly and sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please say I affirm.
I affirm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Dr. Marsden Smedley.
Thank you.
Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Honour. Now, Doctor, could I trouble you to put on the hearing loop again? And can you confirm for me, please, that you can hear me okay?
I can.
Lovely, thank you. Now, Doctor, when you were last in court, we tendered the 4 previous reports plus an addendum that you had prepared for the purposes of this litigation. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And last week, and in fact over the weekend, you prepared a further report titled the 5th Expert Report by you.
That's correct.
Could I ask, please, that could I ask Mr. Temponi, please, to bring up that last report of Dr. Marsden Smedley, which is document 203. And if we could go to the next 2 pages, it's only a short report. And just scroll through, please, Mr. Temponi. And Doctor, would you please confirm that that's the 5th report that you've prepared?
That's correct.
Thank you. And Doctor, the contents of that, do the contents of that report reflect the further evidence that you wish to give in response to the questions that were asked of you that appear in Appendix 1 to that report?
Yes.
Thank you. I tender that report, Your Honour.
Thank you.
Nothing further, Your Honour.
Thanks. Mr. Reid.
Thank you. Doctor, when you received the contract, I think it was, for you to do some investigations in relation to the wildfires that had occurred in January of 2013, your brief was what?
My brief was to record information on what happened during the major fires that occurred in Tasmania that summer, so that the information would not be lost. What tends to happen is that when we get major bushfires, lots of effort is put into suppressing and controlling the fire, and then everybody goes home at the end of it and, quite honestly, normally forgets about it. And so when we're trying to learn from these fires, it's really important to know what happened so that that information can be used to improve future fire management.
When you say what happened, you mean during the fire?
That's correct.
Yes, so your brief was not cause in relation to these fires, it was what happened during it.
That's right. And in particular, what was the fire behaviour, what were the fuels being burnt, what was the suppression that was done, but really concentrating on the fire behaviour so that that could be used to improve specifically future fire behaviour modelling.
Now, you went out into the area of the Fawcett Dunalley bushfire on the 14th and 15th of April 2013, didn't you?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Right. Could CB 88 please be brought up?
Yes.
Yeah, now this is headed Tasmania 2013 Wildfires Data Collection Sheet.
That's right.
And it's your sheet.
Correct.
And it's your handwriting on the sheet.
Yes.
Right. Can we please deal with the first entry? And what I'm really interested in is your methodology. Are you right with the hearing, Luke?
Yep.
Good.
Thank you.
I'm interested in your methodology and what it was that you have recorded, and I'm interested in some detail in relation to it.
Okay.
Just by reference to GPS point 1.
Okay, so what I do is I have a map-enabled GPS, which in those days was a eTrex GPS, an eTrex Gecko, which was a very basic GPS back in those days, and waypoint 001 is just the default number allocated by the GPS when I hit a waypoint.
Right. Can I stop you there? Can we bring up CB123? And can we go to 0598? Now, there you will see plot 1,
yes.
Fawcett, with some vegetation type, and then an easting and a northing.
Yes.
That is the easting and the northing of GPS point 1 in CB 88, isn't it?
I believe so. I haven't actually gone back and specifically checked that,
Right.
but I believe that that would be the GPS point that was recorded when I automatically downloaded the GPS into my computer, and then the computer generates that for me.
Right. Thank you. Well, can we bring those two documents up side by side? Now we're going to need to minimise the one on the right, Mr. Temponio, a little bit, because I think specifically the last entry might be of assistance to Dr. Marsden Smedley. Can we move the document on the right across so we can see the entry to the right of it. And keep going, thank you. Yes. Now, you can see that you've recorded fire severity partial crown scorch, and in your fire severity, you have got partial crown scorch.
That's right.
And you can probably go across the remainder of the entries to identify, can you, that they, one is your notes and two is your computer-generated record.
That's right.
Thank you. So you're content that they are the same, dealing with the same waypoint?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Now, if we can just bring back page 0258 into the full, thank you. And you'll see there that two photos are referred to, 8064 and 8065.
That's right.
Right, and can we have, please, CB 103? And can we have the first photograph up, please? Is that 8064? We need 8064. Sorry. Yes. And that depicts a partial crown scorch.
Yes.
And that's the photograph that you are the first of the two photographs that you're referring to, taken on the 14th of April.
Yes.
Your very first, your start of this investigative process.
Yes.
Thank you. And this was down at Pirates Bay Road, so it's got nothing to do with the area of 242 and 244.
That's right.
Right, thank you. Now, you've described that as a partial crown scorch. Can you, by reference to that photograph, please assist His Honour as to why that's a partial and not a total crown scorch?
If you look, it's a bit hard to see in the photograph, but if you look in the centre near the top, you can see that the trees in the background still have their leaves on them. And obviously, when you're on the ground, you can see a lot more clearly. And I assess that as a type 3, which is partial crown scorch.
Right. Thank you. Now, in terms of spotting,
yes,
it's less likely that the convective effect on spotting will have a part to play in a partial crown scorch than a total crown scorch.
In the period of time shortly after when the ember lands to create the spot, the fire will still be in its build-up phase, so it'll be much less likely to be a crown fire and therefore give you a crown scorch. Is that what you're asking me?
No, it wasn't. It was the embarkation of the ember rather than its landing, the takeoff.
Do you mean, is your question that a fire burning a partial crown scorch will be less likely to spot?
Yes, yes. Yes, it's a general question. I'm not suggesting that we're talking about spotting from the photograph in front of you. I'm asking you a general question.
Okay. A partial crown scorch fire will not be burning at its full potential intensity. So obviously it will be less likely to be doing large-scale spotting. But remember that this forest here is a damp forest, which is an intermediate type between the dry forest you've got around Fawcett and Inala Road and a proper wet forest like you get, say, in the southern forests of Tasmania. So it's an intermediate type. So it still has a lot of fuel, it still has big trees, and so even at a partial crown scorch, you would be getting a lot of spotting. Although it needs to be stated that this particular spot, the fire was burning at about midnight.
No, I'm not. Sorry, I'm not asking you about this photograph. I was asking as a general proposition.
Sure. Okay.
And
You just finished with the photograph, Mr. Reid?
I have finished with the photograph. Thank you.
Take it down then, thanks.
Yes. Can we go, please, to back to CB 88? And can we go to 0264? Now, you'll see there that you have rated a fire severity at this particular GPS point as 6 with the crown fire. And the photo 8081, if that can be brought up, please. And can you please, by reference to that photo, explain why it is that for that, when you found that, you rated it a 6 rather than a 3?
If you look at the photo, you'll note that there are very few of the original leaves left on the canopy, nor the leaves, the epicormic buds coming off the trunk. They've sprouted since the fire, and you'll note that there are no leaves actually up in the canopy left from pre-fire. So that canopy has been completely burnt during the fire.
Thank you. Now I want to go to Crown Scorch with you, and if we bring back document CB88 and go to page 258 and scroll down to GPS point 3, you'll see there that you've got a 4 Crown Scorch. Now, just so that I can understand this in a general sense, a full crown scorch is more likely, embers are more likely to be thrown from full crown scorches than partial crown, and then less likely from a crown scorch, as a general proposition.
The more intense the fire, yes, more the embers that'll be thrown, and I presume you mean crown fire, a full crown fire, do you mean?
Yes.
That would be what I rated, I think, is a 6. I'd have to check the exact shorthand that I used. That would be throwing a lot of embers, and a crown scorch at a 4 is the leaves in the canopy are killed by the fire, but they're not fully burnt in the canopy, and so that is a less intense fire. But yes, it almost certainly, particularly in this example where it's a wet forest, that would be throwing a significant number of embers.
Right. Now, can we have a look at photo 8088, please? I'm sorry, 8066. I'm sorry about that, Mr. Tempone. I couldn't read Dr. Marsden Smedley's writing. Right, now, you've rated that, as you've seen, as a 4 Crown Scorch. Can you please explain why that rating's been given, on what basis?
What I would have assessed when I was on the ground was that the canopy had not been physically burnt, but the heat of the fire had actually killed the leaves in the canopy.
Thank you. And can we go, please, back to the document, that's back to CB88, thank you. And we'll move down to GPS point 4, and you'll see that you've given fire severity 2, no Crown Scorch.
Yes.
Sorry, Doctor, you're looking at something there.
I was just checking my coding system.
Oh, right. Well, can we pause while you do that, please? And when you've done it, can you explain your coding system, particularly in relation to intensity and the propensity for spots to emanate from those areas?
What I have done is I have rated the fire severity on a 6-point scale from basically unburnt through to full crown fire. So that's what the numbers mean. And in most cases, I've actually also put in the descriptor as well.
Yes.
And that's in Appendix 2 of my report that I wrote on these fires in 2014.
Yes, that's where we find that explanation. But as to the propensity to spot,
Yes.
we don't find that in there, and the propensity to spot from that area builds as one moves from 0 through to 6.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, can we look then, please? Oh, I've chosen a bad example, Doctor, because it appears you didn't take a photograph at waypoint 4. Could we scroll through that document until we find... keep going, please, Mr. Tempono. Yes, can we stop there at waypoint 7?
Yes.
That appears to be fire severity 2, no scorch. And we have a photograph 6069. If we could have that photo up, please. And by reference to that photograph, may not be a good example for you, Doctor.
Well, what you can see in that photograph is that the fire was obviously of much lower intensity because it hasn't burnt even all of the lower near surface and elevated fuels. And so what I would have been looking at there was that the fire was a low enough intensity that the canopy essentially is unscathed by the fire, in that it wasn't even scorched.
Right.
So that's a 2.
I believe so, yes.
Now, while we're with that photograph, Mr. Tempono, could you expose the metadata, please? And this indicates that it was taken on the 14th at 12:21. Can we just go back, please, to the first photograph that we looked at? That's 8064, and the metadata for that, indicating the 14th at 11:22.
Yes.
So you've been at it for over an hour at this stage.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And you're content that the metadata shown on these photographs is correct?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you.
I have not modified that in any way, so yes.
Thank you. Good.
The only thing I can't be totally sure is whether I'd remembered to change the time from daylight saving.
Oh, I see.
But that'd only make a 1 hour difference.
Yes. But if we try to work out how long you spent somewhere or between waypoints, we can do it by reference to the metadata.
Yes.
Yes.
I can tell you how long it normally takes me to do a site if you want me to.
If you would, please.
It varies, but typically it takes in the region of 5 to 15 minutes to record that information. By using a score sheet like I did, I can radically reduce the amount of time it takes me to record information, and also the score sheet acts as a prompt, so I am much less likely to forget to record certain bits of information, because I was recording quite a few different factors.
And the methodology that you use you use obviously visual observation. What else do you do?
In this situation, it's almost entirely visual observation. What I've done during my career is actually physically sample a large number of vegetation plots where I have measured the amount of fuel in a site, where I've estimated it visually and then physically gone in and cut the fuel, taken it away and analysed it for its different components. And what has been shown is that providing a standardisation system is used, that system is reliable for the observer who's doing it. Without standardisation, those types of visual assessments are highly unreliable. As an example, I had a PhD student, Steve Leonard, a few years ago, and we were assessing grassland and shrub plots prior to burning, and he and I both did it independently, where we made our visual assessments, and then Steve then took away all the fuel and physically measured it, and we found that both his estimates and my estimates were the same, but we were both about 10% out. And so using that, we standardised ourselves, and after that we found that we could make very accurate and consistent estimates by eye. But it's absolutely fundamental that I need to emphasise, you have to be standardised. You have to have done the work to make sure that you're accurate.
And did the 10% correction occur before or after the Fawcett Dunalley bushfire?
Before.
Thank you. Now, we go to CB 123, please. And we can see there the heading vegetation type. Is the answer that you've just given relevant to that column?
Yes, it is relevant to dry forest, damp forest, wet forest, button grass, moorlands, shrublands, heathlands, yes.
Oh, sorry, yes, you've answered that question perfectly, but the question was wrong. The difference between damp forest and wet forest is not informed by the fuel type. Is that so?
It is an influence on the amount of fuel and type of fuel present at a site.
Right. Well, where do we find the fuel type? Is there a second page in Appendix 2.2?
I believe it is in my report. I'm just flicking into it. Appendix 2.3, site fuel data. Is that what you're asking me for? In my report,
right.
page 75.
So have a look at the screen, Dr. Marsden-Smedley. Is that the information?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, can you please explain to His Honour the difference between the various headings, surface, near surface, elevated, canopy and bow?
Certainly. Now, if you go back 20 to 30 years in Australia, fuel characteristics basically meant the total fine fuel load. But what we found when we started to do more fire behaviour modelling was that the rate of fire spread was very poorly correlated with the total fuel load, but it was much better correlated with fuel structure, fuel type and fuel composition. So as a result of that...
Sorry, can I stop you there? Where does the concept fuel weight fit in with that?
That's the fuel load.
And is that a reliable indicator, fuel weight?
It's not a reliable indicator of fire spread rate. Yeah. And in fact, when you do a proper analysis, taking different factors into consideration, you find that fire spread rate is negatively correlated with fuel load. i.e., that means that as the fuel load increases, when you account for different factors, the fires burn slower. It's counterintuitive, I know, which is why it took so long to work it out, and that's why it was so important that they produced the fuel hazard guides, like the one produced in Victoria by Hines et al. 2010. That is what I use.
Thank you. Can we come back now to the answer you were giving before I interrupted you in relation to surface, near surface, etc.?
What we do is we divide the fuel array into 4 stratums. There is the surface fuel, which is the dead fuel, less than 6 mil in diameter, which is on the ground surface or in very close proximity to it, and is mostly horizontal. That fuel, being close to the ground surface, tends to be moister because it's sitting on the ground. It also has poor aeration because, again, it's on the ground. Directly above the surface fuel is... Can
I just stop you with surface fuel for a moment, please? Sure. That surface fuel, the moisture content of that surface fuel is likely to vary according to where it is. For example, on a northwest facing slope, it's likely to have less moisture content than in a gully.
That is correct.
And in terms of hosting a firebrand or an ember, the lesser the moisture content, the better the host it is. In other words, the more likely it is to have ignition.
That is correct. The more likely that the ember will actually start a spot fire.
Thank you. Now, I'm You're getting used to me interrupting you. I hope you're coping. I think you're about to move to near surface.
Now, the near surface fuels are the fuels which are above the surface, are a mixture of live and dead fuels. They are the small grasses and shrubs that are generally vertical orientation or close to it, and that is the most important stratum for the spread rate. The fire will normally spread fastest through the near surface fuels than any of the other parts of the fuel. So that's the really critical one for rate of fire spread. Now, okay.
I'm going to stop you and we'll move back to surface for a moment. All we can see under surface is litter. Can we scroll down to some further waypoints, please? And we'll find that we've got grass, litter, grassy needles. Can you explain the difference, what you find that leads you to write those different descriptors?
Okay. They are fairly closely related to the vegetation type at a site. For example, in the silver peppermint like you get at 242 Whitehill Road, that you'll get mostly litter fuel, which is small branches, leaves and twigs. Now, grassy fuel is, as it said, basically grass. And so, for example, Viminalis tends to be a grassy vegetation type, so the surface fuels are mostly grassing. Needles would be things like the hakeas, the allocasuarinas, and they are more shrubby vegetation type.
So knowledge of precisely what is in a particular peat or gully is most important in relation to, in the context of spotting, most important in relation to the hosting of an ember, that is, an ember igniting a further fire.
It will have a strong influence, yes, but if the environment is very dry, spot fires can be lit by embers in almost any topographic position. And in fact, in many situations, they are more likely to start in gullies when it's very dry, because you tend to get more continuous fuels and more fuel to host the ember, so to speak. So in many situations, spot fires will start in gullies. When it's less dry, they'll be more likely to start on the dry ridges.
Right. Can we go back, please, to the field notes? Document 88. Do you have any, do these field notes record the dryness or otherwise of the surface fuel?
No.
Thank you. Can we go back, please, to the document that I keep interrupting on? And I think the next logical question has got to be an explanation from your doctor as to the difference between the near surface fuels and in particular the propensity of an ember to come from that type of near surface fuel.
It's probably more important to consider the level of fire intensity than the type of fuel. All of these dry forest fuels are highly prone to spotting, and so the fire intensity and the dryness of the fuel will have a bigger influence, although even bigger influence than that will be the bark fuel, the type of bark and amount of bark on the trees.
Bark fuel has recently been called into question in, most recent research has called into question the importance of bark fuel, hasn't it?
Not to my knowledge.
We'll come back to that then, Doctor. Elevated fuel, what is that?
Elevated fuels are the larger shrubs which are above the near surface fuel. They're typically things like large shrubs, juvenile trees, and they are really important in predicting the height of flames.
So we have there a height in metres. That's the height of the elevated fuel, is it?
Yes.
Not the height in flames?
No, that's the average height of the elevated fuel stratum.
Right.
And the way I assess that is I look across the top of the fuel array and you'll be able to see there's a change in density. And above that, they get sparser, below much denser. And that height is the height at which you get that change in density. And I do the same for the near surface fuel as well.
So in terms of flame height, how does the height of the fuel, the elevated fuel that you've just described, dictate, how does it relate to flame height?
Because it actually tends to carry the fire up into the canopy. So it's a really strong influence on larger flames, which therefore have a higher propensity to result in a crown fire. So if you've got a fire intense enough to burn the elevated fuels, it's likely to then also, if it's high elevated, carry the fire into the canopy. Which is why the flame height model is primarily derived from the rate of fire spread and the elevated fuel height.
And how does that correlate? Again, I'm sorry, perhaps I didn't follow what you just said, but let's take, for example, an elevated fuel height of 3, which is the first one. What do you say, how does that lead you to any estimate of flame height?
I would have to put it into, it would depend on the conditions. So I'd have to put it into the flame height predictive model to get that prediction. But the higher the elevated height, when it was burnt, the more likely it would be to carry it into the canopy and create either canopy scorch, or if the fire was intense enough, a crown fire.
Right, the next heading's canopy.
Yes.
And we have the height of the canopy in metres.
Yes.
Cover percentage, is that so?
Yes.
And the type.
The dominant
Dominant species.
Dominant species,
right.
Yes. In that case, Eucalyptus obliqua, stringy bark.
Right. And then we have bark measurements that your evidence is quite predictive of spotting.
Yeah, that's a fibrous bark with a high quantity and a previous fire char of 50%. So 50% of the bark was black, essentially.
Right, now the first one's 50, the second one's 90.
Yes.
If you've got a 90% charring of bark, is that more likely to be productive of embers than a 50% charring of bark?
Not necessarily. It would depend also on the amount of bark that was left and how it's attached to the tree. So even if it was black but poorly attached, i.e. you can go up to the tree and pull it off very easily, that would be easy for the fire then to effectively pull it off and carry it forward as an ember.
Right, and can we go back to CB88, please? Now, do we have any measure that describes that which you've just given evidence about?
Well, we've got the bark type. In this waypoint 7, it's a candle bark. It's got a moderate quantity. It's got a 10% char, and it's white gum, Eucalyptus verminalis.
Right, so all of those variables are important in predicting the whether or not an ember will have left that area of ground, or could have left that area of ground.
Yes, but remembering, of course, that the most critical factor is the rate of fire spread and the intensity of the fire on the day that it was burning. But if you're doing an assessment of the likelihood, that is the factor, the information that you would take into account.
Right. Well, now, if we can go to 0269 of that document. And we're now on the 15th of April, so we're on day 2 of your work.
Yes.
And if we scroll down, please, to GPS point 52.
Yes.
And we have a look at the photograph there, 6081. And we have a look at the metadata of that, please.
My apologies, Mr. Ray, was it 8081?
Well, I think we may have to get, Dr. Marsden Spedley may have transposed his figures here.
Now, could you go back to
6801, if we get that up. It is the one that you've got, sorry, no, that's, let's just get that 8081 up for a minute, yes. Now, I'm sure that's the right photo. Doctor, we may have some difficulty here in identifying the photograph.
Can you please go to the next plot down and check in if I've just made it could be my dyslexia coming in.
Well, the next
Yes.
plot down gives you 6082.
Oh, they're all 8s, aren't they?
Yes.
So one would suppose that it's...
Well, that's...
What I just recognised the photo there. So if you were about to take me to Inala Road,
Yes.
You're right, it's 68.
6801.
Because 6803 from memory and 6802 are both at Inala Road.
Yes.
So, and Sugarloaf Road was done just before Inala Road because that was the route I took back up from Connolly's Marsh.
Yes, thank you. So waypoint 51 is Sugarloaf Road. If we go back to CB 88, so waypoint 52 Sugarloaf Road, waypoint 53 Inala Road, and that ought to read 6801.
That's correct.
Right, now if we can open up 6801, that is the photograph for Inala Road.
No, that's Connolly's, that's Sugarloaf Road,
I'm
isn't
sorry, it's Sugarloaf Road.
Yes.
I'm very sorry. But if that's Sugarloaf Road. If we just expose the metadata for that, please. And you'll see that that's taken at 149. It might be 1249 or 249, but we'll settle on it as 149 for the moment. Thank you. And then you've moved to Inala Road, and that's the next photograph.
That's right.
And if we expose the metadata for that, that's at 156.
Yes.
And if we move, please, to the next one, 54, and we look at the 6803, and we'll see that the metadata for that has that at 226.
Okay.
Right, so we've got those times. They're likely, therefore, to be sequential.
That's right.
And can we just finish that sequence by looking at 6804, which is at Woodvine
Nature Reserve.
Woodvine Nature Reserve, thank you. Looks like you might have left the V out of your notes, but that's fine. And that's at 255. And that's the next in the sequence.
I believe so.
Right, thank you. Now, can we please go back to GPS 53, that's on page 269. And if we could get up document CB123 and scroll down to 53. Scroll up now, I think. Yes, up in there. 53, keep going up, please, Mr. Tempono. Keep going up. Here we go, force it 53, and you'll see there the GPS coordinates, 555 525 525 9284. And if we could just minimise that, please, and get up CB 150 alongside it. Don't like the look of that hourglass, but I'll wait. We could take the tools box out of the one on the right. Thank you. Now, we're looking at 50. We're looking at 53. Can you please mark on CB 150 the position of the coordinates?
Now, if we move the cursor on the map is what you want me to...
Yes, please,
yeah.
yes.
Now, if you move the cursor to... Here it says Dunalley Road. If you go to just... Now, go... I've got a 53 is 555, nearly 4. Yep, go...
It's on that little bend of road just above the word Dunalley.
I would believe so, yes.
So can we just between the A in Dunalley and the road in the photograph, can you put a little, put an arrow in there and a 52 going to it? Sorry, 53 going to it, I mean. I need the screenshot.
Yes, but yeah, no, it probably needs to be reloaded by the look of it. Well, now, Mr. Reid, you wanted an opportunity to look at the missing piece of transcript.
Yes.
Will you be able to do that now if we took a...
Yes, I could, indeed. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll retire until I'm called for. We'll sort this little glitch out and you can have a look at the YouTube. We'll inquire first, however, to see if a transcript's been possible in the time we've been sitting this morning, but I doubt it. Yeah. All right, thank you. I'll retire.
All stand.